What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to go through and update those redraft running back rankings for those redraft fantasy football leagues. We're going to get through my top 40 today. This is kind of a part 2 to the rankings update that we did in July. This is our August update. So hopefully you guys are subscribed to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future updates that we do to those other positions. The wide receiver position is already on the channel and the quarterbacks and tight ends coming later this week. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video. And let's start talking about these running backs. All right, so as you can see, I have the tier maker pulled up on the screen here for today's video. We have 8 tiers to get through all 40 of these players. Not only am I going to give you guys the ranking of the player, but I'm also giving you guys them in tiers because I want you guys to kind of know how I'm viewing them for your fantasy football teams. As you can see, the guys at the top are going to be the elite RB1s, and the guys at the bottom are going to be those flex running backs or handcuffs to those better running backs in the tiers above. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of 1, how I'm ranking them amongst each other, and 2, how I'm viewing them for your fantasy football lineups to go into week 1 of the NFL season. So going into tier 1, I do have 3 players here in this tier. For me, it's Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Jahmyr Gibbs. In our last update, Saquon was the RB1, Bijan was the RB2. The only change that we have here is they have swapped, and that is because there's been a Landon Dickerson injury to the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles. Also, a little bit more worry, I think, about longevity for Saquon Barkley. Not that I think he's going to be a bad pick, and not that I'm projecting injury, but when you get as many touches as he did last year, it does just raise a tiny bit of risk for him. And I think Bijan Robinson in a PPR type of format, which that's what these rankings are based on, a PPR league, Bijan's going to catch more passes than Saquon Barkley. So that is really the only change in this tier, but all of these players are going to be the elite top 3 running backs for fantasy. Now moving on to my tier 2, as you can see, I got 4 players in this tier. For me, it's Christian McCaffrey as the running back 4, followed by Achane, Ashton, Jeanty, and Derrick Henry. That rounds out my top 7 running backs. These are all the high-end RB1s for me. Christian McCaffrey obviously is going to be a bell cow. Isaac Guerendo is expected to miss some time here, who was supposed to be the handcuff. Jordan James also missing time. They signed Amir Abdullah. It's going to be the Christian McCaffrey show. Whether his body holds up or not, that's the question, but obviously he's going to have some risk. I think there's a ton of upside with Christian McCaffrey as well, and honestly, there's an argument that he could be in the back end of that elite RB1 tier above him. Achane's going to be a beast for PPR leagues. I think he's going to catch a ton of receptions. The thing with Achane is obviously we want Tua Tagovailoa to stay healthy, but we're not projecting injury in the rankings. Jeanty is going to be a monster both on the ground and in the PPR game, catching passes, so he should be very good. And then Derrick Henry also going to see a lot of work in this offense, a lot of touchdown potential for him, but not a lot of pass catching opportunities, so that's why he's at the back end of this tier. Looking at my tier 3, I have 5 running backs here to round out those solid RB1s. Bucky, Irving, Chase Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, and Kyren Williams are those guys. Bucky Irving at the top of the tier for me. Rachaad White is dealing with a groin injury right now. We are still kind of collecting information about that and how long that can keep him out, if it's going to keep him out at all. So for me, Bucky Irving, he was already a guy that I had at the top of my rankings for the most part in this tier. And if Rachaad White misses time, he should see an increase, at least early on in the season. Chase Brown's kind of the same deal. Zach Moss was cut. I am a Taj Brooks truther for Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues, but Chase Brown should see a massive workload, both in the receiving game and in the rushing game for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the other guys, Taylor, Jacobs, and Kyren, they're all bell cows for their teams. They should have the red zone work for those teams as well. And really, there's nothing negative to say about these players. For me, like I said, they're all very solid running back ones, and I'd be very comfortable with any of these players as the first running back selection for my team. Even better if you can grab one of these guys as the RB2 and get that weekly RB1 upside. Now, I am going to go into my tier 4 here, and tier 4 I've labeled as fringe RB1s, and I think really it's just because there is a couple question marks about these players, but I think they possess weekly RB1 upside depending on, certain matchups and things like that. At the end of the day, I do think James Cook has a real argument of being in the tier above him. The only reason why I have him down one tier and why I'm a little bit less confident drafting him at this moment in time is a contract dispute with the Buffalo Bills. I do expect that to be resolved by week 1. I don't expect James Cook to miss time, but until I see that actually physically happen and we can tangibly say he's not going to be sitting out anymore, I can't put him in the tier above, but I think he has the ability to jump a tier as soon as he signs that contract. But for me, he's going to be at the top of this tier for now. Omarion Hampton is another player that's been rising up my rankings. Really, it's just because of Najee Harris. Najee Harris has been dealing with a firework injury. He's not not necessarily going to be reliable for week 1. They don't know if he's going to even be suiting up for week 1. There's a lot of speculation about what happened to his eye during that injury. Really, it's just opening the door for Marion Hampton to take the majority of the workload here for the Los Angeles Chargers earlier than expected, and he should be a very, very solid player. He did lose Rashawn Slater on the offensive line, so that's something to pay attention to, but he should be a bell cow in this very run-heavy offense. Breece Hall is the last player in this tier. I still have a tiny bit of hope for Breece Hall, but it's not great. They want to use some Braylon Allen. They want to use some Isaiah Davis. They want to get these other guys involved as well. So is he going to be a full, 100% bell cow? Probably not. How good is the offense going to be? I'm not sure. It does seem like that offensive line in New York has improved. I think he's the last of the potential RB1s here for fantasy, so I am going to keep him in this tier, but I've lost a little bit of the optimism that I had for Breece Hall earlier in the offseason, because as we've gotten to some of these preseason games, you are seeing Braylon be used. You are seeing Isaiah Davis be used. And so Breece Hall's an interesting case, but I'd still be willing to take the shot on him, especially, like I said, as my RB2, because I think he has weekly RB1 upside. Moving on to tier 5, that is the high-end RB2s, and we are now halfway through the top 40. As you can see, we got 2 running back 20 there. So Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Kenneth Walker III, Chuba Hubbard, and Trevion Henderson make up the tier for me. This is a very interesting tier. I really don't have strong conviction in any of these guys one way or the other. If you wanted to, order this a different way for you in your tier, that's fine with me as long as you cluster these players together. I think Kamara and James Conner are the most reliable of these RB2s right now. Kenneth Walker has the highest upside, and so does Trevion Henderson. But Kenneth Walker, he's been a player for me that I've been a little bit lower on than the consensus this offseason. He is a player that is just consistently dealing with nagging injuries, and he's been dealing with nagging injuries all summer long. He's missing practices currently as we speak. It's an undisclosed injury. It has been like ankle and foot injuries for him earlier in the summer, so that is something I am watching very closely. He possesses a lot of risk because we've obviously seen him miss time before. He hasn't really ever been, fully healthy for an entire season, and it seems like right now he's dealing with some injury as well. So he's a player that I'm kind of pumping the brakes on just a little bit, and I would take Conner over Kenneth Walker just based off of early projections of the workload and obviously health being considered there as well. Chuba Hubbard is an interesting player. I think Rico Dowdle is going to be a little bit more involved than people want, but he's still a player that rounds into my top 24. And then Trevion Henderson, I mentioned, he has a massive upside in this offense. It's just going to be how much of the workload does he get? He can be super efficient on minimal touches. I think very similar to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs has been, where early on, obviously Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't getting a full workload. He wasn't seeing a ton of opportunity, but he was still, smashing for fantasy football. Trevion Henderson can do the same thing. I think the questions are, how good is this offensive line going to be in New England? How much is Ramondre Stevenson going to steal? Is Stevenson going to steal goal line work? And some of the other questions there as well. But he is a swing for the fences type of pick here. And if you were looking for upside in this group, Henderson would be probably the highest upside pick in this group of guys in tier 5. Now moving on to tier 6, this is going to be just those solid running back 2s. The rest of the guys that we can kind of just plug in and rely on a weekly basis, I think at least early on. For me, this tier is going to be Isaiah Pacheco coming in at running back 21, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Aaron Jones, and Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is a massive red flag. I will talk about him in just a second. I think for me right now, the biggest discrepancy in this tier that I have from the rest of the community at this moment in time is probably Isaiah Pacheco. I've been talking all offseason about how much I like Pacheco as a potential value in drafts. I think he's still going to get the majority of the workload here in Kansas City, and obviously it's a good offensive line. There should be quite a bit of offensive touchdown potential here in this offense as well. So I think he's a player people are just maybe burned on from last year. We were getting very high on Pacheco last year, and then he missed the year with the injury. I don't know. I can't really put it together. I think for redraft purposes, he's a value, and he's a player that I've been targeting in all of my drafts. So I have him at 21. Monty should still be good as a change of pace guy, as a 1B in this backfield to Gibbs. Swift should have the opportunity to kind of break out with only Roshan and Kyle Monangai behind him right now. I think he has a really good opportunity to be a pass catcher in this Ben Johnson offense. Tony Pollard, he's another player that I think is rising up my rankings just a tiny bit. Tajay Spears is dealing with an ankle injury. It is questionable whether or not he's going to be ready for week 1. If he doesn't play, obviously Tony Pollard has the ability to be a 20+ touch type of guy early on in the season, and we hope that this Tennessee Titans offense takes a step forward with Cam Ward under center. Aaron Jones is another player here that I think is interesting interesting because of the offense that he's in. I just think Jordan Mason can take a little bit of the goal line work, so I'm not projecting a very high-end range of outcomes for Aaron Jones, but he should be very solid with a very high weekly floor. And then Joe Mixon is the other guy I think where injury is a big concern for him. He hasn't practiced in minicamp. He hasn't practiced in training camp. They have said that his availability for week 1 is in question. He is a player that if you do not want to touch him, if you do not want to draft him, I do not blame you. I think for me, he's a player that is probably off of my draft boards as well. I don't know if I would touch him in my own redraft leagues, but I don't think it's out of the range of outcomes here where Joe Mixon is available, early on in the season. Maybe he misses a couple games to start 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. It doesn't really matter to me. But at the end of the day, if he is on the football field and if he is healthy for the Houston Texans, Nick Chubb doesn't wow me. Woody Marks, I think, is still a work in progress as a prospect. I don't even think he was a great prospect overall. And I do think that Joe Mixon has the ability to see the workload again, be a bell cow. It's not a good offensive line, but he's going to be a volume RB2. So he's a player that I am not necessarily drafting, but it's hard for me to rank him any lower just based off of the volume that he will get if he is healthy for the Houston Texans team. Now, moving on to the next tier, it is my RB3s with upside. We have a lot of upside with, I think, a lot of these guys. There is some ambiguous backfields. There's guys that have some characteristics or some traits that I really do like. I am going to kick it off, RB27, RJ Harvey, followed by Caleb Johnson, Brian Robinson Jr., Travis Etienne, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Jordan Mason. For me, really, this is kind of the not perfect prospect rookie tier where Harvey and Johnson, who do have guys like Jalen Warren and J.K. Dobbins that they're going to compete with early on in the season, do have the ability eventually to take over a backfield. But because we can't project that to be week 1 and we don't have a full season where they are going to be the 1A or the number 1 guy in their offense at least, I do think we have to bump them down a little bit in our pre-draft rankings. But those two guys have breakout potential, have the ability to see their value increase over the course of the season, and they should be probably targeted in drafts because of the value insulation that can hit your lineups with those guys there on your teams. Brian Robinson in a good offense, minimal competition. It's still Austin Eckler who's probably going to take some of the PPR work. And then you have a guy in Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt who I like for Dynasty. We'll see how involved he is as a rookie, but B-Rob should still be the goal line back in a very good offense. ETN is my pick to win the Jacksonville starting job. He's still going to be splitting time with Bashal Tutin, with Tank Bigsby, and there have been rumors that maybe Travis Etienne is playing for the chance to even play on the Jacksonville Jags before getting traded. I don't know if that's actually necessarily the case. Like I said, I project him to be the week 1 starter for the Jags, but he's a player that I would be taking a shot on because we have seen Liam Cohen have very good running back systems with guys like Bucky, Irving, and Rachaad White before. So I do like Travis Etienne as an upside pick, especially where his ADP is currently. Tyrone Tracy Jr. rising up my ranks just a tiny bit. He's separating himself from Cam Scatabo, and that's really just because Scatabo is missing time with a hamstring injury. So Tyrone Tracy, for me, a PPR back, is going to get some of the early down work. I think while Scatabo misses time, he's a player that you can probably draft as a running back 3 or a flex for you, depending on what your lineups look like. And then Jordan Mason for me, like I said, with the Aaron Jones pick, I think Mason takes a little bit of the goal line work, some of the early down work. If Jones gets banged up, Mason has probably top 12-ish running back potential in this offense. I think he would shoot up weekly rankings very rapidly, and he would be a very strong start if Jones missed time. So he has a lot of upside for just injury insurance as well. Plus, I am projecting him to have a decent role in the offense as is. And now my last and final tier here. This is the flex running backs and handcuffs. I do have this tier with a total of 8 players. Starting off as my running back 33, it's Jalen Warren, followed by Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, Ramondre Stevenson, Zach Charbonnet, Cam Scatabo, Tajay Spears, and Rachaad White to finish it off as the running back 40. In this tier for me, I really just want to talk about a couple of these players. Javonte Williams, he's a player that is projected to be the lead back. He has Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue who are banged up right now, but it's hard for me to trust Javonte Williams, and it's not out of the range of outcomes that once Blue is healthy, he takes some of the PPR work. Once Sanders is healthy, he kind of spells Javonte Williams. It could be a mess in Dallas this year in the running back room, and there have been potential rumors of them going out and adding a guy like Breece Hall if he becomes available for trade, Travis Etienne if he becomes available for trade, or some of these other guys. So I don't know if they're even done looking at the running back position. Maybe Jerry Jones wants to make a splash, but for now, Javonte Williams, a not so sexy running back flex play for me in my rankings. J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Warren, and Ramondre Stevenson are just guys that I think are going to spell the starters in their offense. Obviously, Stevenson going to spell Henderson, Dobbins going to spell Harvey, and Warren going to spell Caleb Johnson. That's because those rookies are obviously going to start start off with not entirely full workloads. I think those rookies will improve over time, and these 3 running backs will lose some value over time. So you are drafting them as an early season play, probably only as that. Now, Charbonnet comes in for me as 37. This is a player that I think we really need to keep an eye on because, like I said, Kenneth Walker injuries, they've been nagging all summer. If Kenneth Walker misses time, Charbonnet would skyrocket up draft boards. We would just need to have that information, obviously, before we start those drafts. But even if it is afterwards, Charbonnet would almost instantly become a RB2, probably a high-end RB2, kind of right where Kenneth Walker is in those rankings. So he's somebody I'm definitely keeping an eye on. And right now in drafts, I'm taking as a very cheap insurance running back with a ton of upside. Gadabo, Spears, and Rachaad White were all guys that I kind of projected as change of pace guys, handcuffs. They're all just dealing with injury right now. Scatabo with the hamstring, like I said, the timeline for his return is still TBD. Tajay Spears, an ankle injury, week 1 is questionable. And then Rachaad White, the severity and the timeline of his injury for his groin injury is still TBD as well. So lots of guys here that I think have the ability to earn roles or be high-end handcuffs, because if anything happens to Pollard, Spears would be good. If anything happens to Bucky, White would be good. If anything happens to Tyrone Tracy, Scatabo would have a ton of workload. So all of these guys, high-end handcuffs, just dealing with injuries right now. So you might get discounts with them in drafts, but it doesn't seem like any of their injuries are projected to, force them to miss a good chunk of regular season time. It's really just, are they going to be there week 1 or are they going to be there, a couple weeks late? So that is kind of what we're looking at for those guys, but I think all valuable handcuffs in their own right. But there you guys have it. That is my updated top 40 running back rankings in August, at the beginning of August, as we prepare for these redraft fantasy football leagues. As always, if you liked the content, make sure you hit the like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. If you haven't seen the wide receiver video, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. That way you don't miss any of the future updates to our rankings, and go check that one out. It is on the channel as one of our most recent uploads. And last but not least, make sure you go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with your fantasy football teams all year round. So hopefully you can get in there, talk some fantasy football with the community, and ask those start-sit questions once it comes time to set those lineups in those leagues to me and the rest of the community. Hopefully we can help you guys win a championship here in 2025. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.